Hello, everyone. I've been going through a lot of different systems. I've been GMing for almost 18 years now, ever since I started to make up my own rules, playing a little bit of weird D&D wannabe when I was very young with my friends, trying to make everything work. And something that I've discovered over my many years of GMing, DMing, whatever it might be for the game that you play, one of the biggest things that I have found that helps a lot, especially if you're coming to a new group, is called a Session Zero. Many of you have heard the term probably Session Zero passed around, and some of you may have left it off, like I have in the past. But the more I meet different groups, online, in person, whether it's Dungeons & Dragons, Pathfinder, or anything in between, it's really good to talk to both your game master and the other players, because this is a group experience. And what you want out of a game might not be the same as what I want out of a game. So let's break down what you might want to discuss in a Session Zero to make sure that your game turns out to be what you and everyone there wants. So one of the first major things that I like to discuss are limitations. Not everyone is comfortable with everything that could possibly happen. Tabletop games are very open. Many different things can happen. Have you had a bad experience in your past? Are you uncomfortable with certain adult concepts that you want to keep out of the game, or abuse, or some terrible things that have happened in your past, or just things that you are not comfortable having happen to talk about? Bring these up. A lot of this comes down to communication. If you are not comfortable in a session, people need to be aware of that, because if you just sit there and don't let it be known, people can't know that. Especially sometimes in online groups these days, if we can't get together in person as much, it can be all the harder for people to tell unless you tell them. And if you're not in a position where you feel comfortable enough to bring up these problems to other players or the GM, then that in itself is a problem, that you're not willing to have that open communication. So just make sure that whenever things are uncomfortable or you have issues, talk about it. Most of us are reasonable adults. If you have a problem, we will talk about it. Other limitations that could come up are some people, I have almost never engaged in things like player versus player. It's a cooperative game. You're supposed to work together against the bad guys. For the most part. I mean, every system's a little different. But are you comfortable with this? Is this expected? I have run a campaign before where it was a good party and an evil party that met separate, and both parties knew from the beginning the final boss would be the two groups coming together and fighting. But I was upfront about this. They knew it from day one. You do not want to sprout these things on people that they might not expect. So, another topic to bring up are expectations, both for yourself, if you're the GM, or a player. We all have our expectations. Now, a lot of these expectations are kind of the more meta level stuff, like scheduling. If you are being brought into a new group, do they meet once a week, twice a week? They're that insane. Do they meet once a month, like I did for a long time with one of my groups? How long do they try and meet? If someone can't make it, do you try and meet if you have enough players? Are people comfortable with missing sessions and coming back in? Are people going to be punished experience or loot because they miss sessions? All of these things can cause issues. So again, discussing this up front is a way to clear out any of the misgivings people might have. How long is the campaign going to be? Because there are many times you're playing through a quick module. It'll be, 5-6 sessions or something, depending on how long you meet as well. And it'll be fine, especially if you're playing with a new group. I would highly recommend signing up for a much shorter length campaign just to test the waters. Or is this some grand epic campaign that's going from level 1 to 20 and it's going to take 2 years and 55 sessions, and that is a very different commitment. Not everyone can do that. So, once again, just being upfront that this is what the group is expecting to do. If you can't fit that into your schedule, unfortunately, you may not be able to play with that group. What is the tone that the group wants to set? Now, if you have a very gritty, dark world full of like this adult stuff, a lot of death, war, all of this stuff, you may not want to bring your happy-go-lucky, sheltered teenager into that world. She may not she may not fit the tone of the world. She may not fit in there. And if you have, again, this dark world, you don't necessarily want to bring in your bar that plays air guitars and is super silly, and just, you want to know what tone you're getting into. If you're playing with a group that loves roleplay, probably don't bring in the character that's min-maxed murder hobo, and it probably that won't work out so well. Again, just match the tone between the players' characters themselves, but also between the GM's world and your characters. You will have a lot better time if your characters at least somewhat can fit the world. I mean, again, you can make odd characters work. They sometimes are interesting to explore, if that's what you know you're getting into. If it catches you off guard, and then suddenly you've had this idea for a character in your mind forever, and you're struggling the entire campaign to make that idea fit, it might not work out so well. Are you comfortable with the PCs keeping secrets from each other? It's a cooperative game. Most people think that, the PCs, at least for the most part, will share information with each other. They'll all work together. They'll be ready to, put aside their differences, because every adventuring party, no matter what system, what group you play with, there's a lot of questions of, why are these people working together? So you have to get past that, and will they work together? Will they keep secrets from each other? Can you expect a lot more intrigue in that stuff? Some people would love that. They love to, the PCs really are kind of kept together, but they all got their secret little things all working in the backgrounds, and some of them might actually be working almost against the other players and what they're trying to do. Again, just know what your group and your GM will allow, because some people might be looking for a group of heroes, and some people might be looking for a group of murder hobos. So you never know. Make sure that you fit in. If you are bringing in a character into a group, make sure that you think about party balance. Now, sometimes you don't have to bring in the exact character that everybody needs. It'll make it a lot easier. I generally would prefer that. But there are sometimes interesting things that can happen if you don't have a perfectly balanced party. So you can make sure that, if you have a party full of rogues, well, if the group is okay with that, maybe bring in another rogue if you want to try it out. I mean, there's been all kinds of fun stories happen of all of one class. I mean, all of one cleric, if for D&D's term, seems like it's a great idea. It seems like it will work great. When you are creating your characters, make sure that your backgrounds and your backstory fit in with the world. A lot of this, again, goes down to talking to your GM. Has your GM told you about the world? Do you have a general idea of the themes of the story that are happening? There's a lot of GMs I know that if you walk up to them and say, hey, I want my character to be from a place like this, they either A, will have their world built well enough that they can say, oh yes, it's right here, or B, I hadn't thought of an area like that. Here, let me work with you and make something like that. Again, just talking. Sometimes the most interesting places and ideas that come out of your world as a GM can come from just talking to your players, incorporating what interests them, and then at least they will be invested in what you make. You can't guarantee the rest of the party will, but if you've all talked about it and are all interested in the same things, then they should. What kind of difficulty are you looking for? Like, what kind of challenge do you really want? Are you some tactically minded, every little square that you move or hex on your grid is carefully calculated? You need to take, 30 minutes in between turns and another 5 minutes on your turn to make sure every little detail of your turn is done perfectly, and that everybody else is all just perfectly mind melded together in order to create this perfect fighting force. and then you need the challenge to meet that, or else you're bored. Or you just, combat is there to shake things up. It's there to add some stakes to things that are happening, and you more want the roleplay side, and you don't really care necessarily about what happens in combat so much. Again, find the balance with you and the other players. Because if some players are looking for the meaty, most difficult experience ever, and other people are playing on easy, and you build your characters to try and be at those two different levels, if there's actually a challenging encounter for these people, it's not going to go well for your role players. So make sure that everyone has an idea of what difficulty you plan to set as a GM. A good question to ask is what do you enjoy? Like I said, for myself, I'm not a huge person on combat. A lot of the life and death situations can add a lot of tension. They have their places. And certainly mixing it in, I don't like all of roleplay either. I do need some meat in there to actually feel like I'm doing something usually, because those are usually the most action-packed, actually doing things is then, where the roleplay is the more fun side, for me. But that's not always the case. Some people love the combat, and they want to do nothing but do a dungeon crawl and combat, and if you say 2 lines in character the whole night, that's good for them. So, do bear in mind that not everyone at your table will likely enjoy the same things. But keeping that in mind, so that either you can engage with your fellow players at the table, because yes, this falls to even players as well. If you know this person has been quiet and hasn't talked much that session, but loves roleplay, just ask them a question. See how they're doing. Do they have some hot take on something? Just try to get everyone involved and make sure that everyone is enjoying it. A lot of times this will fall on the GM a bit to try and push things along and do this. But always remember, as players too, you can do something about it as well. And the last thing really in a session 0 to discuss is the more mechanics of things. Like, do you have any homebrew rules that are not listed in whatever system that you are using? Make sure you are upfront about whether you are using these, thinking of using these, or have used these in the past. Just be upfront with your players. Tell them that this is an idea you have. Sometimes, a lot of times when I try and introduce home rules, we'll try it out for a few sessions and then ask the group, did you like it? Did you not? And there are many rules that we have used that get shot down, and generally I agree a lot of times with my players when that seemed like a really good idea at the time, and it didn't. If there's any abilities, races, classes, anything that people need to know when they're building their character that they should not or cannot use, or need to, talk to you to use if you're the dungeon master or GM, let them know. Again, just being upfront, as most of this is said, communicating. How do they generate stats? How do they generate any currency they have? Any of these questions that will make everything smoother for both the GM and the player. Now, do bear in mind, a session 0, it doesn't have to be a full 8-hour session of what everybody's doing. Session 0s can be quick talks online. They can be just a couple hours before the session if you're with a group you trust more. It can be a much quicker thing. Make sure everyone's on the same page, make minor adjustments to characters if needed right before they start, so that, again, everyone is on the same page, the characters will fit in your world and be ready, and everyone knows that they will be here for a rough number of sessions. You won't obviously know exactly how many, but you'll have a good idea of how long it'll last and how often you'll meet, and hopefully if everything comes together, you'll mesh well and you'll know it right from session 1. You don't have to question it so much. You don't have to be worried about the new group, or even a group you've been with for a while. Everyone's on the same page, and that's really important, that everyone knows what you're doing and everyone's there to have a good time. So I hope that clarifies some things. I know in the past I never ran session 0s. I thought, why on earth would I need to do this? And as I've learned and grown into an old man, I have certainly learned that sometimes, just maybe, a little extra communication, especially right up front, and sometimes being a little blunt maybe, can go a long way. And making sure that you and the party all have a good time. Thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more from me. And as always, everyone, remember to be awesome. Until the next one, take care. Bye-bye.